This your chicken and geese much bigger.
Everybody ready?
As
Ready,
will
ready.
ever be.
Ready, great. Welcome Ipswich. I'd like to call the Ipswich School Committee meeting of October 7th to order at 7:03. Thank you all for coming, and thank you out there in the TV world. Caroline, could you please read our mission statement?
Yeah. Ipswich Public Schools aspires to empower all students to be global citizens who are effective communicators, analytical problem solvers, and savvy consumers of information. We propose to do this through an emphasis on communication, critical thinking, creativity, self-management, perseverance, and collaboration. Students will be active partners in authentic learning, offering voice and choice, and demonstrating competency.
Thank you.
Before we go any further, there's been a lot of discussion in the community about our microphones and being able to hear or not hear when we're out there in YouTube world. So if you could all please just bring the microphones closer to you and speak directly into them when you're speaking. This way everybody out there can hear us. It's kind of tough through the masks. So and just remember that during the course of the evening, it'll make things a lot easier for folks, including when we look back at the meeting to be able to capture different notes that we weren't able to get during the meeting. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Blake. Thank you, Caroline. Announcements. The next school committee meeting will be held on October 21st at 7 p.m. in the middle school, high school ensemble room. The special town meeting will be held on Saturday, October 16th at 9 a.m. Now this is being held in the stands and on the field of the stadium. And everyone, please bring proper footwear. Sneakers would be great, just to not hurt the field. Thank you.
You may want to remember, those are just porta potties out there until we build a building with real restrooms.
Aye, aye. And it's a long walk.
It's a long walk to the building.
Correct.
The O'Flynn toilets.
Yeah. Don't name those toilets after me. The building would be okay.
The following subcommittee meetings will be held. Communications on October 18th at 5 p.m. and Budget on October 18th at 5:30 p.m. The communications or the budget? Budget's at 6 p.m. and I thought we were talking about, no, we're not.
Does that work for you, Hugh?
Yeah, that's fine.
And we're meeting negotiations on the 19th. There will be no school for all students on Monday, October 11th, and Tuesday, October 12th. All district offices will be closed on Monday, October 11th, in observance of Indigenous Peoples' Day. Professional Development Day for all staff is Tuesday, October 12th. Do you want to mention or are you going to do that? So that's it for the announcements. Are there any other announcements? Okay, thank you. Special acknowledgements, Dr. Blake.
Yes, I have two this evening. I'd like to recognize our school nurses for their continued work during the pandemic and all of the added responsibilities that they have in terms of tracking students and tracking staff for both COVID-related illness and symptoms, as well as all the vaccination information. So it's a lot more on their plate, and I appreciate all their extra work. And then I also want to give a shout out to Jen Spencer and Lena Lopez Ryan for their collaboration and piloting the elementary math coaching model. There was a lot of work done over the summer that you're going to hear about here shortly. So just want to say thank you for all of their work.
Thank you, Dr. Blake. Any other special acknowledgements? Okay, thank you. Citizens' queries. Seeing and hearing none, we'll get on to Caroline Jepson, our high school representative, with your representative report, please.
Yes.
Thank you.
Hello, Ipswich school community. Below are some of the happenings at the Ipswich High School. In the arts department, there are a number of senior student-directed one-act plays that are set to be performed this coming winter. The Chamber Orchestra also continues to work on 4 new pieces, which are set to be performed at both of their December concerts. Also, the jazz band is set to have a concert in the near future, as well as a competition this coming year. In the sports area, the golf team is doing very well this year, with 6 wins and 6 losses so far. 2 players, Evan Stein and Charlie Jepson, made it to the Cape Ann League Championship, which they competed in today. The boys cross country team continues their undefeated season. Finn Russell, Toby Adams, Garrett Silvera, and Max Jones beat their own personal records. The girls cross country team has beat Amesbury and Georgetown in their most recent meets, Amelia Stacy coming in first. The girls volleyball team has had a 9-1 season. Kendra Brown had 10 digs and 18 assists. Clara Flynn had 6 blocks and 6 kills. For clubs and fundraisers, the 40% Club is starting Music Mondays, in which they play music at the school on Monday mornings. The Interact Club is making Boo Bags, which are candy bags, for Spirit Week, which is going to be in the next couple weeks. And the Environmental Club had their first beach cleanup last Saturday and have a hike planned for this weekend. In general, most students are doing well in terms of adjusting back into the school year, but many students are also feeling overwhelmed with their workload and activities with the start of this school year. The school year feels very busy this year, with this being the first normal year for high school freshmen and a return to normal for high school for all other students. Thank you.
Thanks, Caroline. Well, we certainly glad that Dr. Blake is bringing this book out, and in Professional Development Day, with Glenn Lyons speaking on subjects of anxiety.
Yeah.
That is about anxiety workload. So,
Yeah.
just thinking. Okay, any other questions for Caroline? Okay, thank you. Next up on the agenda is a new member application for the Traversal Weatherall Grant Committee. This is the community member, correct, Emily?
Yep.
So I read her curriculum vitae, and she seems really good, really strong, lots of experience, and would make a great community rep.
Absolutely.
So does anyone else have anything to add about Patricia Ganley?
Move to support.
Second.
Moved by Greg, second by Emily. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor? It's unanimous. Thank you. So this is where I go for the record every night, right? I never get it.
Yeah, then we tend to get bogged down at
Never
about 8
get it.
o'clock.
Never get it.
You won't get the record tonight, I'm telling you right
I
now.
know we're not. I know we're not. The next we have Mr. Krieger, as well as, I'm sorry, I'm not prepared for the Model UN, but please step to the microphone
Great, thank
for
you.
the field trip. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Dr. Blake, school committee members. I'm here tonight to talk about the Model UN conference, the overnight field trip. The conference is scheduled for April 1st to the 3rd, and we've been going to the Boston College Conference for many years, and we're really excited to do it. We know there's some questions about COVID. It's several months away, but I'm bringing this to you because, we always respect school committee. We don't want to talk to students about it before you've certainly had a chance to hear about it. But right now we've got about 40 students who are interested. We leave Ipswich on Friday the 1st, stay overnight for committee sessions. There's dinner. They are committees all day Saturday until Saturday night, and then we have committee sessions on Sunday, and we come home. Last year, of course, we shut down on March 13th, and this conference was scheduled for March 20th. So very disappointed for the students. That was 2020. They had a virtual conference last year. We chose not to attend, along with 7 other schools who thought to have students work online Zoom from 6 to 10 on a Friday night and for 8 hours on Saturday was smart. we did hold a conference here at the high school for 30 students, and we'll work at another one here in November. So I'm very proud of our students. They work pretty hard. We always have been showing. This year, we got students from all 4 grades who were interested. We met twice. And, I'm happy to answer any questions you have about it. A little bit about the finances. So, before we ever talk to students about money, we come to school committee. The cost per student is approximately $300, and that'll cover everything. The money is due to Boston College by November 1st, and it is 100% refundable until December 31st. So, we're hoping that by December we'll have a sense of what's going on in April, and then we can make a determination then. Of course, we're always transparent with parents, so the communication is clear, like, here's where we are, and if we don't feel comfortable committing to it, Boston College isn't open to refunds, then we'll have to make a decision before the 31st. The conference attracts schools from around the Commonwealth, as well as schools from as far as Chicago. Every couple of years, they have some school from China or overseas, and it's sort of just a fantastic experience for students. So that's kind of an overview. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Yes.
Just for those of us who don't know, can you tell us a little bit about what Model UN is and what goes on?
Sure. So Model UN gives the opportunity for students to participate in a simulation of the United Nations. And what they do is they play the role of an individual, or they play the role of an ambassador of a country, and they are in committees. Committee sizes range from 15 up to 70. And the committees are everything from current issues, so they'll talk about human trafficking. This year's committees talk about climate change, the weaponization of space. And then there are historic committees and future committees. So last year for the Ipswich conference, we had 2 very distinct committees. For example, we had a committee where students played the role in the court of Queen Elizabeth I. So students played Queen Elizabeth and then everyone else. And then the second committee we did Jurassic Park. And students, it was pretty cool. And so students do research, they write a position paper, and they practice skills that we think are lifelong skills. So, at the start of the meeting, we talk about the skills that we like to explore, and so we do get into perseverance, critical thinking, communication, collaboration. So we're really proud of the modeling process about how it hits those 7 habits of mind.
Great.
Great endeavor.
Do you hear that, Vicky? Do you know that?
I did, it's fantastic.
Good.
Move to support.
Second.
Moved by Hughes, second by Emily. Is there any further discussion?
We have a long tradition of supporting this conference. It's been incredibly successful. So I think the kids all value it. I think they have a great time. I think they're also, well monitored. I think they're well-behaved kids, and they meet other kids from other communities, which is something they need to do now after COVID. So I think it's going to be great for them. I look forward to it.
Yeah, I've heard great things about it over the years from you. Someday we should bring some of the students into to give us an after-action report.
So I will let you try and talk to students to come to school committee. We have. maybe Dr. Blake, you can give an incentive or something. But we talk to students. I think you would love to hear them.
Yeah, we would.
And so I will. We'll make that happen.
Great. I'd be appreciative.
I hope.
The money, you've got 2 weeks to raise the money, correct?
Yeah. So we're going to work with DC. We're going to work with DC to extend that deadline. But what we told students was I said I'm going before a school committee tonight. By the way, I have to tell my partner Alexandra Ayo-Lapierre is a co-advisor. She has a 10-month-old, so she got to stay home tonight, which I think is a pretty good deal. But I just want to give a shout out to her. She does an incredible amount of work. So we've talked with students, and we said we'll circle back after this. But I think financially, we'll if we miss it down on DC, we'll be flexible with us. We've been good to them.
Okay. And you have scholarships too.
There is scholarship money. I'm really proud, and I believe this is the 18th year I've been the Acknowledgement advisor. We've never turned a student away for financial need. DC has a scholarship fund, which we benefited from, and we've been very fortunate that we've never had to turn a student away, and that won't start this year.
Great.
Yeah.
Has there been any discussion from BC about requiring vaccination of students attending?
So no, DC, they're college students, so they get thrown a lot of questions. So, you know, we would certainly talk to Dr. Blake and, you know, Mr. Mitchell about, you know, protocols. We will wait and see what they say. You know, it's so far away, you know, not that we're hoping we're not unmasked by them, but whatever it is, we'll adhere to the protocols that the districts have. So if they say, you know, Ipswich students don't have to be masked, but, you know, we have a different policy, we'll adhere to our policy.
Yeah, BC has a vaccination policy for their students.
Right.
But it's going to be hard for our students because I guess we don't know, everyone's old enough they could get the vaccine.
Right, so they have been asked a lot of questions, and what they are saying, which I think is reasonable, let's take it one step at a time, let's see where we are on the conference.
Okay, any further discussion? Great, all those in favor? It's unanimous, thank you very much. Is this, there we
The
go.
official signature, so I can.
Great, thank you.
You're all set.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you
Krieger.
very much, Mr. Krieger. Okay. Next up, we have Tracy Wagner, Ms. Lopez Ryan, Ms. Spencer, and Ms. McMahon on the illustrated map presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming
Of
tonight.
course, I'm happy to present. I'm going to wait for a minute for this to come up. Let's see. As I said to Jen, I'm really the wind beneath the wings tonight, and I will be the man of the slideshow that the presentation belongs to this crew. And get this going. Okay. Just start. There it goes. Here. You ready? No. All right, here it comes.
Thanks for having
And I'm guessing you should talk right into the mic, but you can move the mic, I think, right?
Ken, if you'd
You
like.
can if you'd like, yeah,
All right.
yeah.
So just tell
But
me when
just-
to-
Thanks for having us. I think it's really important that you get a glimpse of what is going on in our elementary classrooms and see all the wonderful things that are happening now. I am Jen Spencer, and this is my colleague and friend Lena Lopez Ryan. We are both veterans of Ipswich Public Schools, and we've got some vast experiences that we bring with us. I have experience teaching in many different grade levels at the elementary level. And Lena has been with us for a number of years as well, and she did recently receive her master's in teaching and leadership. So we're excited to bring our experiences to our positions. We have a history of collaborating and co-teaching together, and we're looking forward to bringing that experience of collaboration to the next level and bring it to across both elementary schools. We do have a new math program, and tonight we're here to tell you a little bit and give you an idea of what our new math program is all about. Why did we change math programs? In 2012, the state frameworks were revised, and everyday math, the program we were using, was no longer in alignment with the standards. And as we learned more and more about the new standards, we found that we needed to supplement, and we had to supplement so much that it was taking us in different directions. And we've had everyday math for 20 plus years perhaps, and it was outdated and it was time for a new program. So we chose illustrative mathematics, and illustrative was written, one of the lead writers is Bill McCallum. He was a founder of illustrative, and he was a lead writer of the state frameworks. So it's clearly aligned. And it was also, has been the top rated program for grades 6 to 12. According to Ed Reports, which is a very well respected organization that evaluates and reviews curriculum. So it was clearly recognized as a good program. And when we heard that they were writing an elementary version,
And it was being written by Kristen Gray and a team of math leaders who we were familiar with as they are nationally recognized leaders. We felt that it would be a good match for us as they understand the shifts in math teaching and learning. Some quarterly superintendent.
So one of the reasons we chose IM was because their core values matched our district's core values. So IM's mission, and I'm just going to read it, is to create a world where all learners know, use, and enjoy math, regardless of race, ethnicity, language, gender, ability, and socioeconomic background. So as a result, the writers were very intentional about designing features and instructional routines that exemplify these values. And these values are like all students are capable learners of mathematics with worthwhile ideas and perspectives. That students learn by doing rather than by watching or being told what needs to be done. And students' cultures and identities are valued. So traditionally, this is just an example here of a lesson that the writers intentionally used, where if you can think traditionally to your own schooling, many problem-solving situations were very generic. They would maybe feature animals or school supplies, or maybe community school. So this is just an example of an effort to foster a sense of belonging and value of all cultures. Writers intentionally provide students this opportunity to learn about ethnically diverse cultures through a very positive and mathematical lens.
So in order for students to feel capable and confident and valued contributing members to their math learning, we need to build and foster productive math communities. And that's a major component of the IM, illustrative math is IM, the IM program. And so building a productive math community really starts on day one of school. And so at the end of the summer, Lena and I did lead some PD for Blue Skies course. And we had an IM strand where teachers could come and we really got a closer look at the program and we collaborated. There were 23 teachers from both elementary schools and we were able to collaborate together. And we looked specifically at community building lessons that we wanted to start the year with. And the next few slides that you'll see are just examples. And if you were fortunate enough to be able to step foot into either building, you would see some similar kinds of things and how the work that we did really came to life. Engaging in meaningful discussions is a major component to math learning. You just see how active they are here. Mathematicians productively struggle. We explicitly teach children that productive struggle is important and is necessary for learning, and it comes under the whole growth mindset, boosting messages that we teach them. Making ideas visible, major component of the program as well. Representations and using different representations from the concrete representational to the abstract. And exploring math identity. We planned during these guys, we talked a lot with teachers about kids thinking about their own math learning, how they view themselves as mathematicians, and what we can do to help foster positive identity and how that affects their learning. Just a few examples of kids and how they identify with different numbers. And I like, as I was looking through the slides, even just remembering, was this a Winthrop picture? Was this a Goyon picture? I don't really, and I know that these happen to be from Goyon, but I know right across the hall, the Winthrop classroom has a similar mathematical quilt. So that's just nice to see. You can ask any young learner in Ipswich, what's your math superpower? And they may will tell you something that they identify with. And what do students have to say? Just some of these boosting messages that they're internalizing, and we hear these messages in classrooms, and things like, this is hard for me, I don't get it yet. You know, they're learning to say those kinds of things and really believe it. And then I just took some testimonials from teachers afterwards, guys, just some things that they had to say about our learning and about the program, and it's really apparent that you can see the core beliefs of the program here. A typical math lesson.
So we would like to just share with you, give you just a sense of the flow of a typical IM lesson. So each lesson follows just the same basic architecture where it starts with a hook. It starts with an invitation to the math. And we call this the warm-up. And one very popular warm-up routine is called Which One Doesn't Belong? And here is an example. I took this from the very day one, lesson 1, grade 5. We started off with this, which one doesn't belong. We would love to do this with you right now. So very simple. Just take a look at these 4 objects, objects A, B, C, D. Can you choose one? And think about how one doesn't belong and also provide a reason for that. So please, students, I just give them some time to think and value it. Would any people like to volunteer? Choose an object. Why would that not belong?
And usually we would do a turn and talk
Yeah.
first. And
There's
a lot of
Yeah.
discussion.
Bottom right doesn't belong.
Bottom right, D, and why do you think that doesn't
There
belong?
are too many blocks.
It's what?
Too many blocks.
Too many blocks.
Tell me more.
Yeah, tell me more. So how many blocks?
4, 6, 8, 10 blocks versus 8 and all the others.
Okay, so object B has 10 blocks, but the other blocks
Have 8.
have 8. Anybody like to see another reason why another object doesn't belong, or like to build on that?
I was thinking B doesn't belong because it's not even. It has the blocks that stick out on the ends on the bottom.
It doesn't have axial symmetry.
And, sorry, and all the rest, what else could we say about the rest of that? That doesn't belong.
They're all even. They have the same number top and bottom.
So we would build on that like precise thinking with that, and the teacher would be recording those thoughts. And we would record exactly what students would say, that's what you're listening about, and value their thinking. And so it's a way to, it's also very accessible to all learners, which is something that's very important.
But the real point is that just like you want to find a reason for every single object. So, does anybody have a reason why A doesn't?
It's folded in half.
2 layers.
There's 2 layers. Right? So it's a compare and contrast. The other objects, we're noticing that they only have 1 layer, but object A has 2 layers. These are, so it's a way to like vocabulary, it's a way to precise the language. It's a very popular.
Does that mean there's 4 separate answers here?
Yes, but it's very, sometimes the children come up with, they come up with reasons when I haven't thought of it. So, yeah, it's very open
You weren't wrong.
and purposely,
You weren't wrong.
so that we would just
Purposely open-ended and one of those activities where it's accessible to everybody. Everybody can contribute something, and then, but it's so open-ended that others can share what they're thinking.
So I imagine there's vast experience with this program that shows that it allows students to progress equally or better than other programs? Is that the idea? So I know it's nice that it's open-minded and everything else, but does it also help kids learn math and learn math better? I think that's the key.
I would say as the top-rated program, I would say yes.
And top rated is one thing, but it's also are kids progressing? So are they learning the material better demonstrably? I guess that's what
We can show you the ways that we assess.
These are examples of there's a lot of different ways, a lot of different warm-up routines. This is an example of the kindergarten warm-up routine. Dot images where we would flash some dot, it would be a series where we would first probably flash 2 dots, then 4. First we would say 2 dots, how many do you see? And then it's a way to, we call this supervising, where you are able to see a set number of, you probably recognize right away that's 4. And that's a skill that we developed that's actually been, research has shown that is very important to develop fluency in math. So that's just an example of dot images when we do kindergarten. We do dot images throughout all grades. It's not just kindergarten. And another example, the array 4 number strings, where we would start off with, okay, 10 times 6. Mentally compute what that would be. How did you figure that out? Then we would go to 3 times 6. Then afterward, 13 times 6. And the reason that's a string is that you can use 10 times 6 and 3 times 6 in order to figure out what 13 times 6 is. The last one would be 12 times 4, and we would see if children are able to use that strategy in order to figure out what 12 times 4 is. Oh, 10 times 4 is 40, 2 times 4 is 8. Are they able to apply that? That's an example. So after a warm-up, it's followed, we start, then we have 2 activities which offer a deep study of the concepts, focused on the goal. And this is an example of a grade 4 task from Unit 1. And again, these tasks are intentionally designed to have these open-ended features so that all learners can access the math. So that all learners, regardless of where you are in your math learning, you're able to participate here, you're able to talk about the math, you're able to create representations, and it fosters that sense of belonging in the class. All students are capable of high levels of math. All students have access to rigorous math instruction. I have to put this in here because I love it. I was able to, I had the opportunity to observe this lesson in grade 1. And these first graders needed to take all of these cards, these shapes, and sort them, but sort them in their own, sort in a way that makes sense to them. So this one student sorted them, as you can see, I actually wrote down these categories. If you look at the long column, that's not many points. The other category is straight points. And then right there on the right, that is hard pointing. And the circle there is not pointing. And so, again, I just love the way, it's just so interesting to see how all the first graders, they really sorted these shapes in their own way, in a way that made sense to them. And to really listen to their reasoning, it was fascinating. But what was also, what I loved about this activity is that we're not telling them, sort this by 3 sides, 4 sides, no sides. Because that just shuts down thinking. We're giving them this opportunity to come up with their own organizational structures, but then when we need to justify their reasoning using vocabulary, and that's when you don't want to introduce right away math. You don't want to just say, okay, these are sides, these are points, these are angles. You want them to play with that concept, play with that idea, and then when they see the need for the precise language, are you talking about point? Are you talking about this corner? I think we need a word for that. We all agree on a word for this. No mathematicians call this word angles. It's much more powerful when you take it in that way. So just some examples of students here with doing the math, sorting, contributions there. And the type of questions that are asked in IAM, just to see here, this is just an example. It's not, traditionally math instruction was just like, it was answer getting, try to solve the problem, and then just use more and more problems and more and more problems, the same types of problems, until you are able to memorize the procedure to get that answer. These are different types of questions, such as, this is the way the student use expanded forms of fraction. What is Lynn's error? So you're really analyzing another student's thinking. How would you fix her mistake? When might you make this error? So that really, really builds on that conceptual understanding of subtraction. Every lesson then ends with some sort of a synthesis where students are expected at the end to just consolidate their thinking and to think about, for example, here, let's say you have to label one of those tick marks with a half, and then maybe ask a question like, suppose the class needs after today, you're asked to explain how to figure out the fraction that the point represents and how far away it is from a half. What would you say? So it's just another opportunity to really think about the goal of the lesson and to consolidate. So there's many opportunities to assess student progress in this After every lesson, there's something called a cool down, which is a daily homework assessment. This is an example of a fourth grade cool down.
Like an exit ticket.
Yeah. And this is an example of a fifth grade cool down. Draw a diagram to show how much sandwich each person gets. If there are 3 sandwiches, you can be shared by 4 people. Again, reasoning, explaining how you know each person gets the same amount. There's also session and end of the unit assessments. There's an example of a first grade end of the unit 1 assessment working on graphing, and third grade end of the unit 1 assessment also working on graphs.
Aside from ICAM, we this year did implement another assessment due to the year and a half that we've been experiencing. Coming back, we administered a universal screener to every 1st through 5th grade student in Ipswich. It's a computer adaptive assessment, and it's to give us data on where kids, if they are on benchmark, one measure, but that should help us as a progress monitor. So we administered in September, we administered in January, and again in the spring. It's a short assessment for kids, but it's computer adaptive in that if they answer a question correctly, they get a harder question, and if they answer incorrectly, they get an easier question. So it really individualizes the questions, and we can get, it's all standards-based, and the information that we get is what they are ready to learn. So you can look by screen and see where they are. And this is from one of our classrooms that I chose. It's one of the many reports, ways of seeing the data, and we can get specific information on students as well. But this is 10 minutes after the student takes the assessment. We have this data that is just seeing if they're benchmark above, below. There's an intervention category or an urgent intervention category. So we're thinking this would be really helpful to us. And before I think A doesn't go in because she's the only birthday girl.
Thank you. I think that's a segue to you.
Do you want to ask that question first?
Okay, well, you're up in the middle. And I think yours is the next piece that answers Sue's question. Yeah.
Hello everyone, Gloria McMahon. Nice to see you all, new members of the committee. See you on the committee yet? Welcome. are welcome to meet because you're always here.
Do you want to comment on which one this belongs to?
I think it is, I was going to say Lena, you're wearing a hat too, Jen, so. Well, Lena and Jen, because they're only two in one frame.
Find a reason for
It's got to be the
everybody
bald
to
guy
have
in D.
Yeah.
I don't know.
They're all right every time.
That's an easy one to say.
Can we talk? No.
So, excited to bring IM to the middle school. We've been doing a lot of work behind the scenes to get to this point. And the first thing we started with lots of staff discussions as to the why, the value of this program, and how we were going to implement it. We've been using big ideas for several years, and we knew it just wasn't getting us to where we wanted to be with mathematical thinking. So we were looking out, and at the same time, the elementary schools had adopted IM, which was really exciting to see that happening down there. We knew from Ed Reports and Desi's Curate program that this program was rated very highly. It was also a middle school program before it became an elementary program, so there's lots of evidence that it has great effects at all middle schools. There are several area middle schools that are using it, such as Hamilton Men, who have been using it for the past few years, so we've been having conversations with them also, and getting some tips and tools from them, and really working collaboratively with some of the local schools, which is exciting. So in 2019, 2020, we began these staff discussions of how we can make this transition, why we need to make this transition, and the value and implementation, how my teachers saw the process of implementing at the middle school. We also brought several of them down to see a Doyon class in action, and coincidentally, 3 of my math teachers have students at the Doyon school who were starting to use the program. So they started to see some of the work coming home. They started having conversations with their own children about what they were seeing in classes, and hearing the excitement of these students coming home and really thinking mathematically. It was a game changer for them. So that was a nice plus that we had that happen. The year after, COVID year, we participated in professional development. So we used the Learn Zillion platform, and we had over the course of the year, on those Wednesdays, early release days, those remote days, full remote days, we were able to bring the professional development right to our teachers. So they worked directly with Learn Zillion several Wednesdays over the course of the year to understand what Jen and Luna had just talked about, what a lesson looks like, the philosophy behind the program, the core beliefs, the strategies that we use with students, and really get their feet wet that way without implementing it first. We also started piloting IM lessons. So the curriculum is free and online, which was really nice. And even though we hadn't purchased the workbooks or the product yet, we were able to go online and pull some of those lessons, and our teachers started using it in their classrooms. So during that year, we were piloting it, talking to Learn Zillion, and really figuring out how best to go forward in the middle school with it. During that time, we started making some decisions about how to do that. I had some concerns about bringing it full-fledged into the middle school with students who had not had any experience or exposure to it, and how that would look for those students. So you'll see during this year, for our full implementation, we're only a few weeks into this, our 6th grade is going full force because those 5th grade students who were 5th graders had experience and exposure to the IM curriculum, to the learning strategies, to the lesson structure, and we thought that was the best way to do it for 6th grade. So it's exciting now to walk into our 6th grade classrooms and see students thinking mathematically and doing mathematically. I'm really excited about that. They've also met, like as I said, with the Hamilton Men teachers. So Kathy Sims and Alan Roche have gone over and had discussions with them, talked about what they've seen over the years, and brought some of those tips back. So it's great collaboration. Grade 7, I wrote a thoughtful implementation, because these are students who have not had any exposure, and my math teachers were a little bit worried about having kind of prerequisite skills and a different order of curriculum. So they're really working on piecing it together, figuring out how they can bring it in, but also making sure they support students who not only haven't had the exposure, but also just came back from a year and a half of very different learning experiences. So we're being very thoughtful about that and how we do it, knowing that next year will be a full implementation of it. 8th grade was probably the biggest conundrum of how to do this, because again, those students haven't had IM. They came back from a pandemic, and some of them we send on to a high school class in algebra, teach algebra 8th grade to students who show that they're ready for that kind of lesson learning. So we decided at the 8th grade level we would wait another year. So
so that's, if we're sending 7th graders up next year, we'll have the program. And we're thinking really thoughtfully, working with Tracy and with John Mitchell about what that's going to look like in a high school class, because if we're implementing it at the middle school, it also needs to be implemented in the algebra class at the high school. And again, it's a top-rated program in algebra and geometry at the high school level. So we'll be working with them to see what that looks like next year for those students in our 8th grade class who take an algebra class before they head off to high school. So it's exciting. It's exciting to see this all work. So that's where we are. Like I said, we're about 4 weeks into it, but I love walking into the classroom and seeing students thinking mathematically and doing, and having those teachers engaging in those conversations. So mine's really short. 4 weeks in, short.
So, one of the challenges has always been, how do we move kids along so they're successful by the time they get to middle school, so that they can get the algebra curriculum, so they can get to the higher level math by the time they finish high school. So, is the plan to move more kids towards algebra by 8th grade? Is that something we're trying to do universally?
That's a great conversation. We've had conversations about having all students take algebra.
Right, that would be my hope. How would we paint that picture?
Yes, I would love to see more students have the opportunity to take algebra at the middle school. When you talk about equity and you think about who the students traditionally have been that have had the opportunity to take algebra, and we know that we're not doing a service to enough kids for that class. So I would really love to see more students taking algebra at 8th grade and being ready for that higher level when we get to high school.
That's really how, as Jen and Lena talked about the guidance and the priorities of equity in the curriculum from K on up, that would be the goal.
You know, I was impressed that Megan Forst, who you guys probably know really well, she was a wonderful math teacher at our high school. And I saw her at the volleyball game against Newburyport the other day. She was watching the Ipswich girls and the volleyball girls from Newburyport she knew as well. And one of the girls on the Newburyport team is an Italian exchange student. And she says, you know, she's performing at an incredibly high level for her age because they learn math much earlier in Italy. And I've seen that in a lot of other places around this country and a lot of places in other countries. I'm just wondering, you know, can we aspire to higher things with our math program? You know, given resources and time, can we move it towards that algebra by 8th grade, or even, you know, move that math along more quickly? Because I do think, you know, there are a lot of places where math is taught earlier than it is here, and more vigorously maybe than it is here. It's nice to see we finally have a Calculus BC program in high school this year, which is the first time ever. You know, which is really a great achievement for us. But that's probably been the standard at other high-performing high schools for 30 years, 40 years.
Well, I'm sure you could see some of the problems that Jen and Lena showed. Those were kindergarten 1, grade 1 and 4, I believe. They're really rigorous. Even as a grown-up, I visit classes sometimes, and I sit about and think about which does it belong to, and the levels of discourse that the children have, and to look out across the classroom and to see the participation equally of all the children is really powerful.
One of the equity challenges we run into with our students at the high school is a lot of kids who gravitate towards engineering programs and want to be engineers. They'll take engineering and robotics and things like that in high school. But unless they have calculus by the time they leave high school, they can't be engineers. They can't achieve enough in their math and engineering classes that they can actually get into an engineering program and sustain it. So a lot of them are boxed out beginning in middle school because they don't hit algebra by the time they're in 8th grade, and if they don't get algebra by the time they're in 8th grade, they can't get calculus by the time they're out of high school, or they can't go to be in an engineering program. And it really does limit a fair percentage of our kids who would otherwise be able to pursue that as a career. And it's a frustrating thing because I know a bunch of the kids who I've seen over the years who are colleagues of my daughters and friends of my daughters, and they if they don't achieve that math level, they end up dropping out of engineering and they have to do other things. And they would be higher. You want the highest, best outcome for a kid, but they can't do things they would love to do because they're limited by their academic opportunities. That's a problem. So what we can do to get those things up to speed by 8th grade would be great.
That'd be great. Everybody had access to algebra at 8th grade would be great. I love that.
My question's more for Lena and Jen. I think thank you for explaining this because it's been presented so many times over the past year, and this is the first time I feel like we've got sort of a soup to nuts explanation that makes sense. So thank you for doing that. I'm sure it took a ton of time. My question is sort of on the opposite end of Hugh's. So at the elementary level, particularly after last year in third grade, I know there's gaps and, teachers are playing catch up. Does IAM provide for, they have their review, they have their assessment, but then there's a review cycle
Spiraling.
to that? Do you go back and, for the kids who are falling down, or is it, then we're moving on to the next thing and they're never quite getting the chance to have a little bit of remediation and support?
Even in the pilot last year, so think of, at Winthrop, Joanne had a few grades the year before had piloted, and then Winthrop joined the beta pilot. So our pandemic year, we're starting with the new math program, but the writers planned for that and have a whole a component of unfinished learning, they call it, and it was full of showing the coherency of lesson to lesson, and if your students don't know this, here's a group of lessons to do, with plenty of options for teachers depending on who's in front of you, but also specific enough that it was helpful. So just knowing that they had a plan for that, and they continued then with their version 1, even though it's version 1, it's no longer a pilot, they've still got a plan for this year, knowing that it wasn't just last year, it's going to continue. So within the program, there is a plan.
The teachers last year were not able to get us to a specific unit, which was very difficult last year. We provided that information to the next year's teacher so that they have that, okay, so we're going to use this called adaptation pack. We're going to use these series of lessons before, let's say we're hitting geometry. Students weren't able to access these lessons. We also are using a star for that reason. So the star is able to pinpoint specific for each student what concepts they may need to review, and use that information. Like, oh, well, it's saying here, this particular student needs to work on fractions, so let's look at the adaptation pack and see what we can do. So we have the resources available.
And what gaps did we have with the old math program that this is filling?
Very well. We noticed that many of the lessons just did not hit the standards. So there was that. And there was also, it did not incorporate the mathematical practices, student practices, such as engaging in discourse, representation. Another example is that we noticed with, when we look at the MCAS questions, they much more align with the IM curriculum. So that question you saw there with Lynn, who was like, look at that mistake, that's an MCAS type of question that you're going to see. So we feel, so those were like the types of higher level thinking skills that we are looking for in a math student just wasn't there and everything. Now we got to the point where teachers are supplementing so much just in order to make sure that we're hitting the standards that it felt like we were doing everything that
It didn't have the same low threshold, high ceiling, we call them, types of problems that were accessible to all students necessarily.
Everyday math, we looked at as reviewed by Ed Reports, so the big national, which looks at the curriculum itself, but also data around the implementation, and everyday math was one of the poorest reviews. So that was clear, we didn't want that.
We've had everyday math, and people have been saying it's the best, and that's what we do for 25 years.
Yeah, but then the standards changed.
You know,
In its day, I think
Yeah,
there was
in
a
its day.
time at the beginning that it was.
Yeah, and then it changed. It evolved, and it started to broaden to be something everyone could do, not just a subset of students. So this was our response.
Yeah, I can speak from experience. My current middle schooler, who has never been a fan of math, I know we're only a month in, but comes home now talking about how much he loves it. I think it's because of the discourse and the, it's more critical thinking, it's more relatable. So I think it's been a great move so far. Like I said, knock on wood, it's only a month in, but hopefully he sticks with it. But it's been a complete 180 for him this year.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
That's great.
So, can you talk a little bit about your work in the schools and how the two of you are working together in both schools to make all of this happen? I think that's a really important piece.
Okay, so we're thinking of taking a role as math specialist, we work with as a math coach. But as a math coach, we think about how we want to support partners, the teachers that are in our schools, to empower them to be the best math teachers they can be. We're thinking about, because we've had experience together, as when I was teaching third grade, Jen came in and was my co-teacher, and we co-taught together for 2 years, and it was such a positive experience, and that's one model that we would like to use from our co-teaching actually is on in grades 1, 3, and 5, and as a way to be a partner with another teacher there. But we're also thinking about just together, like trying to think lean data, and that's one of the things that we've been doing. We've implemented the STAR assessments, and just to see, okay, where are the gaps here? What we need to be able to see, what are we going to do with the gaps? How are we going to contribute? And that's kind of what we're doing right now.
And I see us as kind of like an in-house, built-in PD for teachers. So, our goal really is to improve learning for students and for teachers. But we're in the buildings and we're there in classrooms. And when something that we're working on in one classroom is a trickle effect. You don't walk in and change everything at once. I mean, changes happen slowly. But when we can be right there, it's better than sending a couple of teachers out to a conference. And that's another part of our position too.
We also are very passionate about aligning the schools. We're better together. We want to collaborate. And it's important that we have to have some structures in place for that collaboration can start. Things like making sure that we're all using the same assessments. Both schools. Are we both making sure, are we scoring in the same way? The systems that we have in place. We need to have a pacing guide so that we can see. It's very hard to collaborate with teachers if they're already in one unit, unit 3 and it's only unit 2. So there are things and structures we want to put in place so that collaboration can happen.
Giving students similar experiences as we move along.
I know math instruction is getting more and more heterogeneous. Every child is in the same classroom and learning the same stuff. How are you guys doing with, like, is it individually differentiated across an entire classroom so every kid's getting more challenging questions? Are there kids who are going ahead or staying behind? Are there kids in accelerated math groups anymore in elementary schools that are doing more advanced math, or does that not happen? I know at the middle school we changed it to heterogeneous grouping as well, right? So that's all, so everyone's together. So how does that work now? I'm trying to figure out where the difference is.
So the math task that we are now implementing in the classroom, I guess we could call it like
Little threshold high
ceiling. And as a result, like those types of tasks, all the students in our class are able to access it. So for example, like the grade 4 example that I showed, that was like a task where we asked students, we're going to give you some numbers and we want you to create as many rectangles with these numbers, so 24, 12. And that type of task, some students can go, like they could create all different types of representations for many different types of numbers. You're able to see their connections, and maybe other students only able to use those blocks to create only 2. But the discussions that are inherent when we come back together are very powerful. So it's very important that all students have access to that rigorous math. And then it provides all these opportunities for teachers purposeful in their questioning, in their scaffolding, so that all students can reach the highest levels within that one task.
The philosophy of the program is that we are all learning together as a math community. There are places within a lesson that can be differentiated when they go after their activities. Definitely room for making things different. But that's also what I see kind of as our in-house PD is helping teachers, because it's not an easy thing, right, to be able to take so many different levels with a task, but then to plan and anticipate what can I anticipate students are going to do and then need, and what kinds of questions am I going to ask when they do. So it's a philosophy, and that's the equity piece too, that everybody's together and then they're able to differentiate.
Super. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All I've heard is the two words. It's great to get an explanation. Very appreciative. Thank you.
Great job. Thank you. Kathy, thank you for explaining the middle school.
Thank you, Kathy.
Thanks.
Tracy, you did an incredible job flipping the slides.
Thanks, Tracy. Okay, great. Thank you. Dr. Flex for getting that arranged. Strategic Plan Working Group Executive Summary. This is this going out to, I'm going to introduce this to Dr.
Yep.
Blake.
So this, the Strategic Planning Working Group has been working over the last 2 years now, and had developed a number of scenarios, and we hadn't finalized the report yet. There's been a lot of discussion. The 3 town boards have agreed, at least in principle, on the strategic planning document that is being produced in terms of the timeline of the major investment groups. And so we wanted to put together a executive summary just so that the voters had something for the upcoming town meeting. And so we spent a couple of meetings just putting this together. It's by no means exhaustive, but it is just a high-level overview of the findings of the working group, how we went about our work, who was on the committee, what the assumptions were going in, and then the scenarios and findings, and then finally the recommendations. So I'm not going to read through it all for you. You have it in your packets to review, but it will be coming out before the town meeting. So I wanted to make sure that you folks had an opportunity to see it.
So you and I talked about perhaps differentiating in the number 2, the major investment groups in the second page. Fiscal year 24 is the feasibility study, I believe. And then the fiscal year, it says 28, but the initial draft said fiscal year 26 is the construction of the building, correct? And the graph,
And bonding,
yes. And the
more
graph,
specifically the bonding. of it.
right, and that follows right here on the strategic plan working group's graph. I really like the graph.
The committee had talked about whether or not we wanted to put any of the slides and graphs that we have in store, I guess. And the consensus at that point was that in order for it to continue to be an executive summary, it would just be well, it's a little over 2 pages, and that was it. And that we, when the final report is published, it would have all of those charts and graphs for people to then, dig into and look at closer.
Does this go out with the town meeting warrant in the mail?
I believe that's the goal.
Great.
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 To your point, Chubb, in number 2, because it says elementary school and then an S in parentheses, and then 2 different years, does that potentially lead people to believe there's 2 buildings, one in FY '24, one in FY '28? Should
You know,
we be
that's
clear
why
that,
you're
right,
gonna clarify
FY
that,
'24 should say feasibility,
But
and FY '28 will say construction?
it's, yeah, that's important.
Yeah, I agree.
Yep.
And if you look at the graph, there's a tiny little bump in the school building graph. I think we got a presentation of this for the tri-board a couple of times.
That's what he's referring to. This is the slideshow from the presentation that.
Remember the
that was at
presentation for the tri-board? I'm just trying to get to, here it is. There's a tiny little bump on the graph for feasibility, and then the construction period goes way up on the expenditure.
So was there a reason why, so it's listed as major investment groups, was there a reason why there's not a sort of a timeline listed there? Because these dates are all over the place. Did the various boards vote to approve the timeline as it was outlined?
We did.
We did.
So I guess if this
The
is,
timeline, illustrated timeline will be a lot more helpful than goals and dates.
I mentioned that to Tony Marino today in a chair call.
yeah, because, to me, when, if I was a taxpayer looking at this without any knowledge, I would say, okay, well, public safety's up, then school buildings are next, and then you go down and you see operational override as number 6, but we're going for that in the spring. I don't know, it seemed to me like it'd be clearer just to have that timeline listed rather than just have all the.
Which
This looks
kind
like-
of what we did on this slide right here.
Right, but that's not going out to,
No,
this
it's
is going
not.
out to the public.
That's why I kind of made, I did make that suggestion
Yeah.
today. A slide
Yeah.
like this would be much more informative. The one with, you might not have been.
I haven't seen it, but
That's correct, sorry.
I will take this back to Tony tomorrow.
So I have another question. I know our former member of the school committee, Carl Nyland, is still on the strategic plan working with us. Joanne Cuff still on it?
She is not,
She's not.
but we listed her because she participated in the whole thing.
Correct. Correct.
Okay?
Any other questions? So this is going to be an important document that we are going to need for our asks, our 2 major asks coming up.
I mean, do we ask to edit the school thing to one Ipswich school override and not have 2?
There was 2 in the original plan, 2 overrides.
I know, but that's not our intent.
It is confusing.
It's confusing. It's propagating something we want to extinguish, I think.
23 and 29, but
Or 24.
Or 24.
24, 28. As opposed to
At the bottom.
oh yeah. I'm sorry. I'm looking at. Wait, I should be looking at
The
the.
school operational override is listed in 23 and 29.
On this, what I have here, it says 24 and 28. But it doesn't matter, I mean,
That's the building.
yeah, it should just be one thing, it should just be 24.
The clarification is feasibility versus,
We have to go to the town meeting for
Feasibility.
feasibility in
So it's
24.
not too, then get rid of the S, that's all.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions on this? Special municipal employees.
so Cheryl and I had conversations over the last couple of weeks around some of our employment groups and people working in, or the ability of people to work in different jobs within the district. And in order to do that, they need to be considered special municipal employees. And it has to do with, in part, the conflict of interest law as well. And so there was a question raised yesterday or today regarding school councils and school committee members, as well as around the conflict of interest law. And so we added school committee members and school council members to this list that we're going to be asking the select board to vote on. Initially, we thought that this was a vote of the school committee, but our understanding from legal counsel when we ran it past them is that it has to be a vote of the selectmen. So ask Cheryl to add anything that I missed.
I mean, that was a pretty good summary, but I'm happy to answer
I
our
think my
questions.
question is more like, explain more clearly why we need to be special municipal employees. What does it protect us from? What does it get us? Why is it change? What changes?
So it allows you to effectively go before or represent individuals to other boards and commissions in town. It also would allow you to, say, coach, if you coached in town, or had any other business or dealings with any other boards, commissions, or positions, pay or non-pay, within the town of Ipswich.
So why do we have to be special municipal employees then?
So you can coach.
So I can coach?
That, it allows you, yeah, it would allow you to coach.
I couldn't coach otherwise?
No. You can, but you're breaking the conflict of interest.
And one, is that what you mean?
I'm sorry.
Coaching like a high school team?
Yes.
Really? You wouldn't be allowed to coach?
Technically, no. I mean, I think that these types of things happen, and this is just something that is with the conflict of interest, we have to have a vote on, and it's filed with the town clerk, as well as it's sent to the state as well, the state commission, state ethics commission. Whether other towns are doing that, I'm sure it probably happens, but this could be a violation if they came in and did some level of audit. It's pretty standard. This is actually a fairly standard vote that is done in municipalities, and it's done for individuals that are in the schools and the towns as well too, because it's fairly common. Not so much people on a school committee or select board, but it can happen. It's more so common with employees that might hold two positions, but in
So
order...
any teachers are coaches, for example? They couldn't do that?
They
have this exemption?
So they can be coaches and get a stipend for coaching. They couldn't be paid an hourly wage for coaching.
Is anyone paid an hourly wage for coaching?
No. And so it also, if, as a school committee member, if for some reason you were to appear before any of the town boards or commissions on a private matter representing a private client, you have to have this designation as well too. It's section 17, I believe, actually, of the conflict of interest that applies to that, because they deem school committee members or select board members, regardless of pay status, as municipal employees.
We have to have the designation for the school committee members, some special municipal employees. Jeff, you had some questions.
Yeah, I had spent some time dealing with this issue when I had served on the Winthrop Council, and I was happy to see that this is something that percolated up through agenda planning, and that Dr. Blake's already spoken to, and Cheryl have done the legwork and gotten this in front of the select board. At that time, I had pulled a copy of a conflict of interest special municipal employee policy that the town had promulgated in 2014. And it appears that at that point, the designation for a school committee had already been made. But I do think it is wise that we make sure that we have an updated list and that school council members would be included, just so that we're not foregoing, willing and capable volunteers who may be interested in serving in those groups.
So you've already been special municipal employees, so this wouldn't change us.
It's reaffirming, right?
Well, we're adding.
Adding and-
number of positions to the list.
Yeah.
Well, we're adding.
Lunches and food service,
EDC
substitutes.
employees, coaches, substitutes.
So we don't need to take any action on this anyway, because you're saying it goes to the
To
to the
vote of
select board
the select board.
for approval,
Yep.
right, okay.
Since this letter was written. Okay, any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Substitute teacher pay raise increase request. That's a ton of question, sorry.
So the notion of substitutes has been, substitute pay and availability has been an issue for a long time, I want to say 3 years ago now. I brought forward, 3 or 4 years ago, I brought forward an increase for teachers and the sub-nurses. And so there's been a lot of discussion around the North Shore superintendents over the last 2 months, I guess. Some surveys have gone out. And we're, looking at it and talking with Heidi, who does a lot of the sub work in terms of applications, talking with the sub callers in the schools. We're hurting for subs. We have a hard time getting subs. And it's an ongoing problem in all districts at this point. So in your packets this evening, I have the current rates for teachers, licensed teachers, and teaching assistants, TAs. I have what the current rates are and what I'm proposing. So I'm looking to have the school committee approve an increase from $90 a day for teachers to $100 a day. And if the sub is already a licensed or previously licensed teacher, i.e. retiree, it would go from the $90 to $115 a day. We do have a number of retirees that would be interested in coming back to sub for us if the pay rate was a little bit better for the day. And then for teaching assistants, I'd like to go from the current $70 a day up to $80 a day. And the projected increased cost to the district would be about $4,800 for the year. And that $4,800 is based on usage last year.
Where do these rates fall in terms of our
They
other local
would
districts?
put us higher in the mix, I would say in the upper third of surrounding districts.
And now we're on the lower third?
Yeah.
I'll move to support.
Second. I just have one question also. Is last year a good indicator of sick days as opposed to looking back at 2019?
Heidi's behind you,
No.
nodding her head, yes.
Thank you, Heidi.
Yes.
It's been her full-time job on the phone. And as you know, I've said this a bunch, I'll say it here in this meeting. It's an onerous paper.
Yeah, we've worked on that and streamlined as much of it as we legally can. There's a number of forms that we just have to have. We've streamlined what we could, because it was very onerous.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay, any other discussion? All those in favor? It's unanimous, thank you.
Thank you.
Next, Dr. Blake and Cheryl.
So I'm just gonna introduce the topic and then let Cheryl speak directly to it. couple of years ago, we started the transition to have HR and payroll more or less combined with the town. In that transition and over time, we've essentially taken our payroll piece back into the office because there was a lot of nuances in the school payroll that the town doesn't have. And with the introduction of Harper's, we needed to do our payroll in a certain way. And that continues. The HR piece has remained with the town. And in the transition, there's been a number of tasks that are, I don't want to say falling through the cracks, but just not having the attention paid to them that they deserve. And so that's been a concern of mine for a while, and in discussions with Bill Frangemore and Joanne Cuff before she retired. And so Cheryl and I had conversations, over the last couple of weeks. She's been in her position for several months now and has gotten a lay of the land and sees, where the workload is and how the workflow is going. And so Cheryl came to me last week or a week ago and said, I'd like to think about an additional part-time position, and here's why. So turn it over to you to just walk us through what that looks like.
Sure, thank you. So as Dr. Blake mentioned, I've had a great opportunity over the last 3.5 months, which, God, that's gone by super quick, to really meet with people, see the process, see the workflow, have lengthy discussions with school and town employees about responsibilities, where there are gaps, where things have gone well, not gone well. And through all those discussions and my own observations, I came to the conclusion that, we do have a bit of a gap that right now we have a Band-Aid on. That is, to Dr. Blake's point, nothing's falling through the cracks, but we could be doing a lot better. And we're also utilizing some outside resources to help us fill this gap. And this gap really comes down to, it's not payroll-related functions, it's more so on the benefit side. And so right now, there's a bit of gray area as to where reconciling health insurance lands, dental insurance, doing calculations as it relates to deductions. I've come to really I always appreciated the fact that the school had a more complicated payroll and benefits function than the town. But I had no concept of really how much more complicated it actually was than the town. And, with the schools, there's, I think we have 6 or 7 different types of pays and pay frequencies. So that affects their deductions and how much we charge for a deduction, and it's a very complicated process. And right now, from my perspective, we don't have the proper time and attention being spent on the benefits piece. It's being, like I said, it's a Band-Aid right now, and we have the payroll coordinator stepping up and really helping us out and doing overtime to help us get through this, but it's not sustainable. And I think that if you kind of look back on history, payroll and benefits initially was a town employee, actually when I was first year working for the town, and things weren't getting done or weren't getting done well. And for the past year, collectively between town employees, school employees, and this outside individual, they've worked really hard to clean things up and make things better. And we want to make sure that we can sustain that path going forward. Some of the risks that are associated with not having some of these functions segregated are key man risk. We have one payroll coordinator. We don't have a proper backup for that individual. They haven't been able to take a vacation in a year because there is no proper backup. They enter the employees' pay rates, deductions, there really should be a segregation between somebody processing payroll and somebody kind of setting up the employee and their rates and deductions and things like that, and checks and balances between those two positions. And right now, they're kind of combined in one. You know, there's been some high turnover, or what I would deem high turnover, 7 employees in about 15 years in the payroll function. And that's not good. You know, consistency in those two function, or that function, is really something that I think the district would want to see. And I'm already seeing that the current payroll coordinator is showing signs of burnout. And I'm concerned about her longevity if, you know, we can't resolve this issue. And I'm happy to answer any questions, but that's just a brief summary of my observations.
It's not a question for this, and it sounds like this is a position that needs to be filled or should be filled eventually. I guess my concern is, when we met last time, we talked about a teacher shortage, we talked about particularly ELL needs, high needs this year, kids coming in, and not just needing to learn the English language, but also really needing a level of support in their schooling. And we just didn't have enough staff to deal with this. And now we're hiring a part-time ELL person, and I think it's a better service to our students, and I think it's a better service to our district that if we're gonna hire another part-time position, it be to support our teachers and our students in our schools, and not in the central office this year. I'm not saying there's not a need, I'm not saying it's not something we should look at next year, but coming off of COVID, and looking at the changes in our community that has happened, and looking at the support that our teachers need and the growth, I would not support funding this position, knowing that there's still needs in our elementary schools in particular that need to be funded.
No, I think that's a great point. We're talking about 2 different funding sources, though, the EL position and the additional support services that we're hiring are coming out of ESSER 3. This would be a budgetary position, so it's two different funding sources.
Yes and no. I mean, you could use a budgetary funding to hire additional support for the elementary school, right? Not just ESSER funds?
But if the ESSER funds are available for that, and we have a surplus in ESSER funds, wouldn't we want to use the ESSER, allocate the ESSER funds to the ELL?
Well, then why are we only hiring a part-time teacher?
Because that's what the need is.
That's not what you reported last week.
Well, I thought, so I have a question on your statement. We heard 12 new students, for example, I think at the last meeting, coming into the district who needed ELL work, help, assistance. If we hire a permanent part-time, a permanent half-time position, which is, this is what this is, a half-time position, correct? And ELL, but those 12 students moved, do we still need that? So we're still satisfying that need right now for the ELL position. Do we let go? That's the question.
They had interviews yesterday. I don't know if they hired anybody.
Okay. And we're using a surplus funding source to pay for that. So we shouldn't put that in the budget right now while we have outside funds, meaning the ESSER funds, available to pay for it. That's just my belief.
I mean, I get that logic, but that's what, hoping they don't stay in district, or that ESSER fund dries up, whereas the budgetary fund is in the budget.
Well,
so why wouldn't we?
That's 2 years down the line.
Maybe so, but doesn't it make sense if we're having an impact, a budgetary impact that affects our students, should we be addressing any sort of hiring in those areas instead of in an area that, albeit needs attention, but maybe doesn't need attention right now?
But it seems like we're doing both. I mean, it seems like we're fulfilling both needs.
I think we're doing both.
But I've only heard about one part-time ELL, nothing about the kindergarten situation or hiring additional support there. So that's still a need.
TAs, they have two teachers in every kindergarten room, and that's not good.
It's all budgeted.
Well, there's still reports that teachers are needing support in both of these areas. And I'm just expressing my opinion that if we're going to be budgeting for a position, it should be to address student need this year, because this year is a particularly tricky year, and to support teachers in their needs this year, rather than something that we seem to have managed, we could get through one more year without. That's just the point I'm trying to make.
Understood, but I do not think, although the position that we just learned is not filled yet, it's being interviewed for the ELL position, we do have funding for it for the next 2 years. So,
And there are funds available for additional supports if we need them.
Well, then are we hiring? Are we using them? I mean, I don't like that reasoning that maybe the kids won't stay, so we're not going to hire
No, I didn't say
a
that.
full-time. I know you didn't, but I wouldn't buy into that line of thinking at all.
I
These are
understand.
students
But
we're
if they
talking
do
about.
stay, so I guess the ESSER funds are used up, and then it becomes a budgetary item if it's needed at that point, you know? So
Right.
the position stays, it's just funded from another source.
But a
you know.
budgetary item
These 2
that
years
we're
then.
coming into an override year that may or may not pass. I mean, there's things, I just think that the students are our priority this year, and if we're hiring support, we really need to make sure that our schools and our students are supported before we're turning to something that we have managed for the time being, would be my position.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it has to be one or the other, though. I mean, I think we have to use those ESSER funds in a way that, because we don't use them, they're gone. So it sounds like you're saying build that position into the budget and have the ESSER funds not be used up just for the sake of having that as a budgeted position.
I'm
You
just
know?
saying that if we're doing hiring, we should be focused on the needs of our schools and our students right now before we're looking at something in the central office that right now has a Band-Aid on it, given the situation that was just explained to us 2 weeks ago about teacher shortages, overcrowded classrooms, an increasing ELL population with needs in addition to learning the English language. So I'd prefer, if we're going to be voting on budgeting new positions, that we be budgeting those positions that are impacting our students and our teaching community first.
So I'd just like to say, I thought that the answers to our kindergarten issues were to have more bodies in the classroom, which we do now.
As opposed to hiring an additional kindergarten teacher and separate and lowering the class size. That's accurate.
So that was the answer that we were given last week for that particular issue. And then I just disagree with you on that. I think we need to use our ESSER funds when we can use those ESSER funds to the advantage of the students, and that's exactly what 2 years of funding for this position, for ELL will do. So, and then we'll fold it into the budget, as Greg says, when the time comes.
Unless the override doesn't pass and we missed an opportunity
That's
to budget
correct.
that position.
And
So,
you know what, we might be eliminating this position that we're hiring, right, being asked to vote on right now too. So we can have both these positions.
I disagree, but
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the problem. If we did put that EL position in the budget and the override failed, then that's a position that would potentially be cut. You know, if we didn't have the money to fund
potentially,
it
or
in
it
the
could be
budget.
something else, or we have different needs. It's just,
Right.
let's think smartly, given the financial situation that we're in, before we're filling positions that, while necessary, aren't facing the acute need that some of our students will benefit directly from. That's all I'm saying.
Understood.
Yeah, I mean, so this is, the salary range says 25 to 28 an hour, 19 hours a week. So, I mean,
Yeah, so the annual pay, if it was a full fiscal year, would be about $25,000 to $28,000 a year. The net budget impact would be about $15,000 to $18,000. If you factor out the overtime that will no longer be incurring and the outside consulting fees we would no longer be incurring. For FY '22, Approximate impact, if they start around November 15th, depending on pay, would be 16 to 18,000, and then again, reducing that by no longer needing overtime and outside consultants as well.
Can I ask, is this something that, I mean, I know every town structures things differently, but
Sure.
is this something, do other towns have similar positions?
Most towns have some kind of benefits administrator or benefits coordinator position. It's a pretty standard position. Where it sits is kind of a mix. Sometimes it's in HR, sometimes it's in treasury, sometimes schools have their own. It really depends. It depends on what town you're in, but pretty much every municipality has some kind of benefits coordinator, benefits administrator position.
Does Ipswich Town have one? Or no, there isn't one at all?
It's pretty much the HR department that's handling that.
And has there been has anyone approached the town about whether that's a position that could be put into an addition in the town budget by having someone else added in the HR department?
Yes, it was.
And it wasn't well received?
I think the recommendation was to look at it from the school district side.
I think that
We have
the
somebody
problem
who
was is the town people were having problems deciphering the school payroll needs.
Right.
Requirements and
Yeah. But it sounds like we have the payroll processing piece under control, but we have that person working overtime on the benefits coordination, and that this would be to handle the benefits.
Right.
Correct. Yep. And again, it's similar to Chubb's point. Benefits are a lot more complicated on the school side than they are on the town side. They're far more straightforward on the town side than it is on the school side. And and if nothing else, from sheer volume of number of employees too. So, it's very different when you look at benefits coordination from a town side versus a school side.
Any other questions? Is there a motion?
Move to support?
Second.
Moved by Greg, second by Hugh. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And all those opposed? 5 to 2. Thank you. Okay. Superintendent's administrative report, please.
Yes. My computer back up here. Okay. I had my first coffee with the superintendent the day after our last school committee meeting downtown at Zoomies. I think it went very well, and I want to thank Umesh for his hospitality in facilitating a lot of the introductions that morning. North Shore Superintendents held our first meeting of the year in Danvers last week. The focus of the discussion was around our reopenings in each of our schools and how we're handling all of the COVID-related issues this year, vaccinations, quarantine, masking. It was good to hear the discussion, and many of us were in the same boat and experiencing the same frustration in dealing with DESE around their requirements and what they're telling us or not telling us this year. Had several meetings regarding the ESSER 3 funds prior to the grant, the initial grant submission last week. We do have a number of funds that are essentially in the parking lot lines, so that we're able to move them around as necessary through amendments. Had reviewed several negotiation scenarios for the IEA, as well as the AFSCME units with Cheryl. in preparation for some of our negotiations. Greg and I attended the IEF meeting last week. I think you're going to talk a little bit about that in your update. I participated in a webinar focused on leading and learning about race, racism, and equity, and submitted an application to be part of a pilot superintendent leadership project with the state. They're going to be choosing up to 20 district leaders who will participate in once-monthly discussions with Dr. Darnisa Amante-Jackson and Dr. Lee Title. The program's being organized by the Race, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, or READY, initiative of the Mass Association of School Superintendents. I should hear in a few weeks if I'm selected for that pilot group. I had several discussions with Bev regarding some complex special education cases, working through several of them we've had some mediations on. Meeting regularly with both elementary principals to discuss and work through a variety of issues and concerns as they transition into the district. Participated in the Rotary meeting last week, and both elementary principals will be attending with me during the beginning part of November, one of the early meetings of the month. I also attended a kickoff meeting with the Greater Cape Ann Chamber of Commerce and their school program, along with Jonathan Mitchell and Justine May, head of our guidance department, looking to participate in some of their job fairs and have some additional job shadowing opportunities and things like that for our high school kids. The Chamber of Commerce, we just I guess rolled into the Greater Cape Ann Chamber. The Ipswich Chamber is no longer a standalone Chamber of Commerce. This week I was out for jury duty one day. I was picked for a case that goes on trial next week, so I'll be out a couple of days next week for the trial. We had a policy subcommittee the other night, and you'll be hearing more about that later on. We also had another IEA negotiations session yesterday. Today I attended a luncheon with several colleagues over at Whittier. Discussion focused on our high school juniors and seniors, particularly the seniors who might not be headed to college after graduation, but are still looking to find their niche. And so what we're looking to perhaps get off the ground either this year or next year is an opportunity for those students to maybe go over to Whittier, either from January on, and explore different programs as possibilities over there, or even just the last quarter of the school year, depending on what their schedule looks like. And we have the Bridge program that our seniors participate in here, where they go out on internships. And so we're looking for opportunities to expand that. And this might be an opportunity for those kids. We're members of Whittier, so at least initially there wouldn't be any fees associated with it. A lot of their students, their seniors, are out on internships and apprenticeships the last half of the year. So the teachers are there and available to our students. And so we're trying to figure out ways to take advantage of that and make more opportunities available for our kids. On this Tuesday coming up, we have our Professional Development Day that you're all invited to attend. I know Tracy sent out a couple of emails. You also received the book this evening, Anxious Kids, Anxious Parents. As you know, one of our focus points this year is around mental health issues for our students. The keynote speaker is Lynn Lyons, the author of the book. She's done a lot of work in the district before, and we decided to bring her back to work with our staff again. So there's a number of workshops. They're all focused around social emotional learning and mental health issues for both staff and students. So we're looking forward to that.
Lynn Lyons speaking in the TAC at 8:30?
She is.
On Tuesday?
Yep. And then there'll be breakout sessions the rest of the day.
Yep. Questions for Dr. Blake? Jeff?
Were there any themes, or can you share some highlights of the feedback or the questions that you received at the coffee meeting last Friday?
No, actually, it was more, meet and greet. I think most of the people didn't have questions. There were just comments about, all positive comments about how we handled COVID and the communication around COVID over the last year and a half. We met with some grandparents who were having coffee.
For a long time, the grandparents.
They were very positive on the school district and talking about their experiences with, over the years and how things are now. So it was, I don't think there was any recurring theme. I looked at Chubb, but Chubb was there with me.
I think there was a recurring theme. It was how their offspring or the people that the kids they knew were faring in the Ipswich school system.
Mm-hmm.
So they wanted to tell their story about their child in the system. It was
Positive.
very, but I'll tell you, I was expecting 4 to 6 people. But
Yeah.
we were in Umesh's company.
Right.
So you know that
Umesh was,
there were 30.
come on over, you gotta meet this guy.
It was really good.
Yeah.
So I was, the school committee did one before COVID, our first one, and it was just a couple of folks. This was
well
great.
attended.
And I think the time of day spoke to that as well. And we did ours on a Saturday at 10. Guess what? Saturday at 10, maybe at 10, they don't want to see us. But it was good. But a lot of time you're catching the people walking by on the street.
Right.
Right.
So it's not like they're.
Or they came in, got in line, said hello.
It was great.
Kept
You guys
going.
ready tomorrow?
Well, hopefully Kate and I have the same experience, and they're not saving all the hard questions for us. We'll be there tomorrow at 8:30.
Again, it was the first one.
Yeah.
I'll be putting out where and when the next one is going to be. I'm supposed to do it in the afternoon, late afternoon, before school committee. So that'll be actually before the next school committee.
Yeah, I think it's great.
KTTV.
All of those opportunities to get out and connect with people
Yeah.
for both the school committee and superintendent are great, so.
And after you do your subcommittee report out, I've got another opportunity I'd like to present to the school committee for all of us to do at the same time.
Is that a segue to me?
I think that might be a segue unless anyone has any questions for Brian on his administrative report. And I know you've got a meeting policy and communications.
Yeah, so Bob's going to cover policy, I think, but I'll do communications. We haven't met since our last meeting, but we did put the newsletter together. It's in your meeting folder. It's scheduled to go out tomorrow, so please take a look and let me know if there's anything you have questions on, edits on. There is a piece about the school budget that Greg wrote up. We decided at the communications subcommittee to highlight some of the pain grants that were funded, so the people who received the newsletter could just hear about it, just sort of some background about the pain grants, and then highlight 3 specific grants, and then send people to the website for details on the other grants. I talked about the meet and greets that we are going to do as a school committee monthly. There's a diversity, equity, and inclusion update, and that's it really. So please let me know if you have any. We don't need to vote on that, do we? The newsletter, we just. So just let me know by tomorrow morning if there's any changes. And then I'd like to schedule the next 2 meet and greets. Greg and I will be at Zoomies tomorrow at 8:30, but I'd like to schedule one for the first week of November and another one for the first week in December. So we need 2 volunteers for each of those.
I'll do the first week in November.
Okay. Do we think we want to mix up the times? and have an afternoon, early evening one
Sure, we can
for
do
one of
that.
those. So we can kind of reach different groups.
And
Chubb likes
maybe
morning.
another place too, although, is Little Wolf have a strong population in the morning?
High school teachers? I don't know. High school teachers,
High school teachers.
middle school teachers.
A Little Wolf.
It's right across the
We're
street.
trying to aim for our current communities, right?
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't suspect it gets the traffic Zoomies gets. So
Excuse me?
I do not suspect it gets the traffic that Zoomies gets.
Right.
So anyone volunteer for first week in November? We could,
I'd be available
If it's
either
gonna
of
be
the
day
two.
or,
Yeah, what
you know,
day?
morning or late afternoon, and then
I prefer morning. That's my preference.
I mean, I'm not doing it, so if
Yeah.
it's Chubb and.
I'll go with you.
If we could just pick.
Early morning in November?
Why don't we do this?
Okay, location to be determined.
So Chubb and Jeff will do November, first week in November. You two can figure out a time and place and just let me
Okay.
know.
We'll figure that out.
Yeah, I'll do December.
I can do December, but I'd prefer it to be an afternoon one, so
That's
that,
fine, yeah.
because I don't know what my work schedule is yet.
Yeah, that's fine.
You like
So-
mornings, don't
Yeah, that'd be good.
you? Yeah, okay.
So Bob and I can figure out December.
Okay. So you just
You
let
do
me
it
know.
at Tedford's.
Because we did commit to coming up with a 3-month schedule and posting it on the website so that
Right.
people could know, as well as circulating it on social media and newsletters and things, so. Okay. That's it.
Great. Well, I'll just bring this other thing up on the new business.
Okay.
The newsletter looks great. Thank you for all the work. The subcommittee, great. Bob, if there's is there any other communication questions? Bob, would you like to report out on policy?
Sure. So one of the things we talked about was that maybe we should explain what we do. So the policy subcommittee group is meeting, and we now have a three-year
Review.
schedule during which we review certain policies. So the whole policy book is broken up into 3 annual blocks. This year, we're going to be reviewing E, G, and I, which are support services, personnel, and instruction. And if anybody's interested in looking at the breakdown, it's actually policy B, G, C, which shows you how it's all broken out. And we reviewed the whole thing. We finished it. This is our second year of the cycle. So we finished going through the whole thing 2 years ago. So we have for you some policies this evening. The first third of the policies from support services are in the folder. There were just a few small changes made, which I can tell you if you have questions about. Policy EB, we literally just eliminated the first sentence of the first paragraph and sort of incorporated it into the second one, just to make it more clear. Under pest management, we just corrected Chris's job title. And then we swapped out under crisis plan activation EBCE, we switched maintained for developed. So, I mean, everything else was no changes. They were pretty small changes, nothing really substantive.
So we did a complete policy revamp. Was that the 2 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
And that took about 2 years to do, I believe. Are you seeing in the next 2 year period from that period to now, are you seeing a lot of MASC changes to their policies? Because we conformed a lot. We took a lot of the Ipswich written policies that were old and outdated and used the MASC policies, correct?
Mm-hmm. And we also got rid of it as we culled through them. I mean, some of them were from the 70s,
Right.
from the 80s,
Yeah.
and they weren't needed anymore. So some were culled. Some were added last year, like the I think it's in here, the EBC supplemental, which is the interim policy on COVID-related issues and the face coverings. So, you know, and as,
Stuff, but not a lot of revisions.
Yeah.
That was my question. So there have been many revisions since we revamped it.
not really.
Okay, understood. Thank you. All right.
We have to
Oh, I
support
was just
these
going to mention one other thing, just a little note, but I'm sorry. I guess there may have been some confusion about the idea that we're reviewing the homework policy. The homework policy was approved in May of 2020, and it's a sort of an overarching policy of the sort of the philosophy of homework in the Ipswich Public Schools. The smaller, not smaller, but the more detailed stuff is done at the building level. We are not reviewing that policy at the moment. It is in our, it'll be reviewed this year because it's in Section I, instruction, but that'll probably be in the spring. But it's nothing that we're looking at. That'll be worked out, the details are worked out in the building administration level.
Yeah, that was brought up at a curriculum night, and I think sort of inartfully communicated out to the parents that the school committee had issued some new policy, and everybody was still waiting to figure out how that policy was going to be rolled out, and that in actuality, it was a policy approved last year, as you just said, and it's being worked out at the building level, but that's the holdup right now. It's not a school committee.
Exactly.
And it was primarily at the elementary level in terms of that discussion around the policy and whether or not, or when it got approved. And part of it is to make sure, again, that both elementary schools are on the same page with homework. And so that's a lot of the discussion that's coming up.
But like, as you were saying, like a lot of the instructional policies are more philosophical from we don't do implementation. We are looking at the philosophy of our homework policy in the school system, not the detailed, intricate stuff. That's all building level.
Can we do we have to vote these individually, or can we just aggregate them? Does it matter?
No, we used to vote them just as a block.
It's a block, just list them all off individually?
Correct.
All right, move to support policy EBCD, EBB, EB, EBCE, EBAB, EBC, supplemental interim policy on COVID-related issues, EBC emergency plans, and EBCFA.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? All those in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you, Todd, Emily.
Okay.
And Kate?
And Kate, sorry, Kate, couldn't you leave you out? Okay, and then liaisons at IEF?
Yeah, so we had our IEF call, what was it, last week, 2 weeks ago. This is their first meeting after their summer break, so they're just sort of ramping things back up again. Just looking through the notes in the agenda. I mean, they're really out there. I mean, their big focus now is to try to determine how to start raising money again. I think they seem like they're finally on a good path and moved on from the issues in the past with the new board. They approved their mission statement. They're sort of just moving on, and they have an enhanced website. So I think they're moving forward to be in a position to start to really continue to help us and help us more in the future with funding. So one of the things they were really interested in is aligning the IEF with FEPI's funds and Fry's fundraising, and they wanted to know from us a list of past pain grants that were approved and pain grants that were not approved. So I think they just want to try to get a sense of where our needs are and where they can help in the future. And there were a couple of, or one in specific, one athletic grant that was approved by the group. But again, I mean, they seem like they're definitely on the right track, and they seem to have a very engaged and well-run board. So it'd be exciting to see where things go, and they're ready to help.
They've been funding Change is Simple in the middle school for the last couple of years. I know that's a successful program. So is that something that's going to continue? be supported by IES,
This is-
something like that?
As far as I know, yeah.
Great. And then, they haven't had a golf tournament year, so, and that was their big money maker.
No, there was talk about, they're actually in the early stages of planning that again, so that'll be something that'll happen likely next year.
Great, great.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Greg? Okay. Do we have any other liaison groups that have met? Have I missed a subcommittee that hasn't met? Okay.
The high school council met on Monday, and discussions were a review of the MCAS data in the high school, and some students and the administration in that building are going to kind of dive into that data over the next month or so. There was also some review of the strategic plan for district improvement, and some issues there that, one was kind of focused on, what role is the SAT going to take in the future, and how can we integrate some of the work that students are doing to prepare for SATs into curriculum. And then a lot of discussion about preparation and making the transition from 8th to 9th grade, and seeing what can be done better to support students making that, and kind of some basic areas of being prepared for lectures and using a textbook and taking notes and trying to get that gap to be a little bit easier. I think there's a lot of frustration with students and teachers that they're feeling this year. And
So that was an initiative that was undertaken right before COVID hit, so this is an example of building that program.
yeah, and all of the educators and the parents and the students in the room all definitely felt that COVID had a lot to do with that. And Carolyn tonight, I think, alluded to students feeling the pressures of having a full work schedule, a full class schedule, and not having that for a year or more. So it was a good meeting.
Have you has anyone spoken to you about a meeting for the fire station adaptive reuse?
It has not come across my email yet.
Started yet? Okay. All right. Thanks, Jeff. New business. Anybody have any new business?
You all should have received your MASC bulletin, and I'm just wondering if anybody's going to the conference this year.
So I am
Delegate assembly.
scheduled to.
Okay.
I've seen the virtual schedule. It's November 3rd through 6th. I'll probably connect with you, Chubb, regarding what's entailed and which of those are district business, about which sessions may be most useful for this committee.
Did we miss the discount date? I'm sorry. There is a discount.
This is just the news, the bulletin. This isn't the actual conference registration. So I don't know that.
Okay. All right. So we need
The school committee usually gets that information.
I got it from Cindy.
It's-
I haven't seen that.
All right. So we need, you need to get registered
Yeah.
for that. Okay. Great, thanks.
I have something for new business.
Yes.
At some point, there's a lot of discussion in the special ed families about, is there a philosophy shift going on from the elementaries to the middle school regarding placements of students on IEPs or 504s? Families are routinely bringing up that they're transitioning students from 5th to 6th grade, having just had an IEP meeting in the spring, and they're still in an IEP, and they get an IEP, and they get to 6th grade in the fall, and services are taken away almost frequently. And so, again, I'm not delving into the individual circumstances, which I know is routinely the excuse of why we can't ever talk about special education, but I would like to know, and I think families should know, if there is sort of a difference in philosophical approach. And if there is, that would be great. And if there isn't, I think it would behoove the special education program to start setting the stage with families of students on IEPs in 5th grade, that this could very well change going into the middle school, so they don't routinely feel blindsided, or that their students already going through a transition, or again, having an additional service taken away, so.
I mean, I think this is a long-standing thing. As long as I can remember, we've had that step down from 5th to 6th grade of special education services as kids graduate from their IEPs into a middle school program that's a little more sparse, I think. And then we're integrated in multiple classes, so it's a whole different way they do it in middle school.
So are you hearing that people aren't getting services when they're asked for it?
They're either not getting services or services they were given on their IP the end of 5th grade are taken away the fall of 6th grade year. And these are students with diagnosis, so the diagnosis isn't changing. So if there's a philosophical difference in how they're being offered and supported, I think we need to do a much better job of either aligning the elementary with the middle school, because that's not a supportive system. 1 month into the school year to hear that your services are being taken away. I don't even know how a teacher could make that assessment after a month. Or do a better job of educating our families. There is in fact a philosophical shift that happens. This is why it happens. And where these are supposed to be individualized educational plans, there shouldn't be a uniform philosophical shift. It should be individualized. And the parents should be a part of this process and not just informed of it 1 month into school. So I think this is something that it sort of upsets me to hear that has been a long-standing issue that's not addressed.
Okay.
That's a great question. I took some notes. I'll get an answer on that.
That'd be great.
I think we've discussed this before with special education. The middle school model is different than elementary. There are a bunch of supports that are entirely different. I'm not sure how that excuses what is perceived as, taking things away, but I think it's just a different model.
And again, that might be, but then we need to do a much better job educating families on what they should expect. And I think they also deserve maybe a revamping of that model and changing it in the spring as opposed to 1 month into school, which would allow
Transition.
a little bit more of a softer landing into middle school. But I'm sure there's very good reasons for it, but again, this is the education communication piece that would be helpful.
Is that coming out of CPAC, or is that just individual people?
It's anecdotal, and
Okay.
it's coming out of CPAC, and it's coming from, parents who talk about these types of things, but it's repeatedly coming up, and to hear that it's repeatedly come up for years, it really should be
Cheryl
addressed.
Forster used to talk about her model was better and different, and she didn't have to have kids on full IEPs, that she could do with different services. And she had supports here and supports here and supports here that were able to do that.
And again, that might be the case, but it's really an education piece that needs to take place if that is in fact the case, and it's noticed to parents that there's going to be a massive shift for your child and what you're used to and what you've probably fought very hard for and worked with your child on with teachers for, a number of years, so.
All right, more new business. So I had the nice occasion to talk to Nat Pulsifer for a while. He's always an engaging guy. He's and the FEFIs are very excited about doing more, providing more, both financially and hope to do something in concert with us to kind of make FEFIs a bigger thing for the district. And I don't know where we are with that process. I know we've talked about it before. But I don't know where administratively we are in terms of building.
So,
Because with more resources, what more can we do?
Right.
And how can we pitch that to the FEFIs to, make a plan for doing more,
Great.
other than what we're already doing?
Great question. One of the topics from our leadership team retreat over the summer was looking at the different funding sources that we have available and how to best utilize them. We don't have a definitive list, but I think what the overarching theme was to look to the FEFIs for some of those bigger projects. Because the funding is available to us, things that we know the budget can't nor will it ever be able to support, and look to have ongoing support, which under the current system we need to make some changes to in terms of the policy around the use of the FEFI's funds. As you know, if a project is brought forward, it's supposed to be worked into the budget and not supposed to be renewed for more than 3 years in a row, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that's implying that either you're getting rid of something to make room in the budget for these additional things, or it's just increasing your budget that much more in order to be absorbed. And so that's historically problematic. And now as the funding availability grows from the FEFIs, it becomes more of an issue. And so things like them supporting all of our field trips is a discussion point. All of our professional development. The potential for, one of the grants that we wrote this year, for example, is having a science specialist come in and look at our science classrooms here at the middle and high school. We just received the preliminary report this week. He met with Tracy and the principals Tuesday, I think, to review some of his preliminary findings, and now he's going to be making some recommendations on how to modernize the labs in here, given the parameters that we've talked to him about. That's going to be a significant project that the FEFIs could potentially fund.
Right, so the idea is whether through paying grant or through administrative, fiat or even just discussion with the committee and the FEFIs and the administration, do we go for these higher goals like a longer school day or other things that are big picture, big transformational changes rather than shifting funding sources? Support, professional development, nice, but that isn't changing anything. How do we change big things? And so they're excited to do some of that stuff, or at least to support it. And they're kind of looking for us to signal what we want. And I don't think we have. So as a group, whether it's led by you or by us, there just has to be some deeper thinking on the aspirational part of the district that the FEFIs, makes available to us. So think big and maybe discuss with your administrators on where you'd want to go or something like that. But they want to be supportive of it, and they keep, every time I see one of them, they're nudging, and Greg probably knows it better than me because he's closer to those guys, but there's a constant push to do more.
Yeah, and I think, we need to obviously talk about adjusting our policies on our end, but I've mentioned to Nat too that they can do the same on their end. I mean, they have a very, very conservative distribution policy, which has been great because the trust is almost double where it was in 2012, and we've gotten $6 or $7 million from it. But, they could also change their distribution policy to allow for maybe a one-off larger distribution if we did have something that was transformational to the district and we needed several $1 million in a year. So, they could look at that on their end too and make adjustments to their policies. But
for example, we some of us were outside standing here last night in a caucus for a meeting, and there's been discussions since for the last couple of years anyway about this area between the Performing Arts Center and the tech wing, about enclosing that and making that into some kind of an art gallery / rehearsal space, for example. It's going to cost millions of dollars to do that. But to Greg's point, if that was a one-off that we could go to the FEFIs and say, hey, we got this idea, it's aspirational, we want to, I think it'd be a cool thing to be able to do this for our community. Is there a way to do it? Right now, there isn't. So we're sort of in a box. Okay, it's wonderful that we have the opportunity and the funding, which we use every year, but the rules have to be flexed in order to have some of those more aspirational conversations. Because the other piece right now under the rules is it has to be sustainable in the budget going forward.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're working off of rules and a framework that was put in place when no one knew how this whole thing would work, and everyone was so nervous that it was going to blow up And it should have stayed as a real estate trust, and we should have been living off the rents from the property. And now it's just been wildly successful. There's no reason that we shouldn't go back and reassess those guidelines.
I think, having done it, we paid for buses and heat and health insurance with Bethany's money for years.
Mhm.
And it was a straight up budgetary supplement. It was not differentiated from anything else. So it felt wasted. It basically deferred overrides. And so.
Is that something we should think about, though?
And so that's what it was. And we were always like, how can I pay for enhancements when we're cutting second grade teachers? And that was our argument. But in fact, so at that time, we were getting $500,000 a year from the FEs, just from rents. And when we were getting it, literally, we had 1 year of growth, natural growth of the budget, right? That sucked up the whole FEs into the budget. Then it was gone forever. It was part of the regular budget forever. And if we hadn't had an override, we'd never have gotten it out. And that's the problem with FE's money as a budgetary supplement. It's worth 1 year. It's just 1 year. That's how much our budget grows beyond what the town can support, unless we have overrides. So we need to protect it desperately from being part of the regular budget or part of regular funds. And the reason we put those things in place were because they're corrupting influence, and it forces us to think of everything in terms of what we can shift to FEs and keep out of the budget, rather than think how can we enhance or improve our education. So I do like the prohibition of having things funded for more than 3 years, at least regular things like a teacher or a program. I think it's a bad idea. Maybe funding, professional development is different because that's every year renewed, or funding field trips is different because that's renewed every year. But certain things like programs and teachers probably should never be in there. I know it's tempting, but it's just a bad idea, I think.
I'd do that over professional development.
I understand. We also didn't fund any professional development at all for 5 or 10 years, like none, zero, no dollars at all. And that was while we had FE's money. So you think we're in a great place right now, but you can get to that point again pretty easily. And it won't take more than a couple budget cycles.
And we might.
So rules help. They convey meaning to future committees.
All right, thank you, Hugh. I've got one last little piece of new business. We don't have a consent agenda, and then we can adjourn after this. Because the vouchers and bills are all set, correct, Kate?
Yep.
Thank you. I spoke with Dorothy Calandra, who runs the Ipswich Dinner Bell, and I'm proposing that the school committee serve at the Ipswich Dinner Bell. The Ipswich Dinner Bell is a community dinner to provide food access to many people, mostly elderly, but some families. It's at the Masonic Hall every Monday. I've done it before. I don't know if anyone else has done it. You've done it, Paul?
I did it with the Scouts.
Yeah, it's a great time. It's a great endeavor to do. It would take us. There are between 60 and 70 people at every Monday night's dinner. There is. They also serve 60 shut-ins with this as well. They need people to set up the dining room, which is round tables, folding tables, and chairs. Serve the meal, serve dessert, serve coffee, and clean up, which means break it all down. We do not do dishes. We do not cook. They need between 5 and 15 people. They would like a donation of $300 from the sponsoring group when we come. And there are the dates of it. It's a really, really great event. It's a great event to get the school committee in front of a different population than we normally see. I can't think of a more worthwhile thing to do. They have available November 1st, November 22nd, November 29th, and December 6th. You show up between 4 and 4:15. and you're out by 6:30. So it's not a long commitment, but it's a very worthwhile thing to do. So, is this something that the school committee would like to do?
Sure.
I would, yeah.
Yep. Looking at dates.
Okay, so there's enough to do it. And I thought that if not all the school committee members are available, I would like our superintendent to join us as well.
Be glad to.
That perhaps a couple of administrators, principals could join too.
Just, just point of clarification, the $300 donation would come from us individually. It can't be public funds,
Correct.
so it wouldn't be budget funds, it would be,
Correct.
we make the donation
Correct.
ourselves.
Correct. And you don't have to, we don't have to divvy it up equally.
I'll have to put in for my $200 stipend this year, Cheryl. Don't let me forget.
So, if are people available on any of those nights?
Could you list the nights again?
The 1st?
Yep.
November 1st? Let me start there. Is anyone available on November 1st? Who wants
I
to
am
do
not.
that? You're not available.
29th or the 6th would be better.
Is the 29th, when is Thanksgiving this year? Does anyone know that?
That's the week of the 22nd.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Oh, so the 29th might,
It's the Monday after, right?
yeah,
It's the Monday after Thanksgiving.
yeah. 29th work?
Well, I don't have my time yet. The 6th would be better for me because I could request it off. But I mean, I can be there any Monday. It's just tough for me to get there by that time. Because I have to pick the dog up and then get to you.
Oh, yeah, but
So-
you can come, can you roll in at 5?
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah.
Easily.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
That's fine.
Do the 29th.
The 6th
No,
is
I can
bad.
do any Monday.
The 6th is bad for me. So the
I'd
29th.
prefer November, yeah.
That's good?
Yep.
29?
Yep.
November 29th?
Is that all right?
Yep.
Sounds good.
Good? Okay. So, and this is not a requirement for everybody to go, but you can email me whether you're coming or not. And I'll because I need to get a population, I need to ask the principals if we can all.
I teach Monday nights, so I will not be able to go.
Okay. So you won't, oh yeah, that's right. So, okay, so I will reach out to Dorothy tomorrow and say that we're on for the 29th. Really good evening. Everybody will love it if you haven't done it. It's awesome. And besides, I want to get the superintendent known in the community. Well, we'll do it again.
Yeah. That's fine.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And that's at the Masonic Hall. All right. That's a lot of new business tonight. Thank you. There's no consent agenda. May I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Thank you. Thank you, Ipswich. Have a nice night.
Might stay on for a bit,
that's you?
so.
I figured it was you. I was going to
No.
So I was driving with my phone, I had someone, an IDA with a big abscess that people don't want to operate on, so I'm trying to find someone to fix it.
You.
So it's
We're going to
probably-
review.